Back in August this year, President Moon Jae-in made public Korea's goal to become a global hub for the manufacture of COVID-19 vaccines and vaccines for future pandemics. While local pharmaceutical companies have yet to add a homegrown vaccine to the global market, they are currently making strides in serving as productive partners for international production. For more, I have Professor Howard Lee from Seoul National University. It is a pleasure to see you again, Professor Lee.
Thank you for having me again.
I also have Dr. Hong Gi-jong of the Korean Vaccine Society. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Hong.
Thank you for the invitation.
Right, Professor Lee, we'll start with you. As part of Samsung Biologics' fill and finish deal with Moderna, the first batch of the latter's vaccines was distributed nationwide last week. Could we start with a few words on this development from you?
Sure. It certainly is a welcome accomplishment. Samsung Biologics, or SB, has completed successfully the first round of manufacturing. And they also survived the good manufacturing practices inspection by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, which basically signifies the quality has been affirmed and confirmed. And this will eventually opens a door of new opportunities, not only for SB, but other companies in South Korea, because that basically shows that the quality has been shown in terms of manufacturing vaccines. And also the time for logistics will be reduced. Formerly it was approximately more than a week, but now it will be saved by up to, I think, 3 days or so. And also at this point, all of those 2.5 million doses that have been manufactured will be consumed by local Korean people. But also we have to admit that there are some shades. This is a manufacturing of new vaccines, but this is not true manufacturing because SB has only done filling and finishing, collectively known as packaging. So they have to show that they are also well qualified for manufacturing the drug substance eventually. And also local manufacturing does not guarantee that all those vaccines will be used by local people. So that is something that we also have to take care of in the future.
Right. Dr. Hong, Samsung Biologics signed the fill and finish deal with Moderna back in May. And in late October, that would be last week, more than 2.4 million doses were shipped nationwide. How do you assess the pace of this manufacturing arrangement?
Actually, although way of production is just simply a battling procedure, but still the production of the Moderna's mRNA vaccine procedure will be performed in Korean Peninsula. That is very big advanced step in Korea for future vaccine preparedness. Actually, Pfizer and Moderna, both innovative company, try to keep their secrets related to the production procedure and the related patents, because those kind of technology will be related to the future pandemic preparedness, and that will be huge their property about the more vaccine development. So first time when the Korean government and Samsung Biologics tried to contact and to propose their collaboration with their mRNA vaccine production, even Moderna's responses are not so positive or smooth, not as shown on the papers or internet. But Korean government, including the KDCA, currently KDCA, formerly KCDC, they keep trying to contact Moderna's, and also Samsung Biologics keep their development procedure, and now we are just take the first step to promote the mRNA vaccine production. It is not the first final proposal of the Korean government or Samsung Biologics, but anyway, it will be the first step to enhance our capacity to produce the mRNA vaccine in Korea, and maybe still we need more efforts to advance to next step, such as the antigen production in Korea and the carrier formulation in Korea, etc.
Right, and talking about taking more steps, Professor Lee, Samsung Biologics is working to add an mRNA manufacturing line within the first half of next year. as part of hopes, that is, to expand its manufacturing deal with Moderna. What more can you tell us about the implications of such an addition?
Well, currently, Lonza, a Switzerland company, is producing the drug substance for the Moderna vaccine outside the United States in the world. In contrast, SB has produced a drug product of the vaccine. In other words, filling and packaging processes have been completed. Technically, that is also manufacturing, which is not as easy as it may sound, but not substantial in technological complexity and advancement. Therefore, being able to manufacture the drug substance locally by a Korean company in Korea means a lot. It signifies SB has met the standards and qualifications for technology transfer from Moderna. This also means that Korea can have a stepping stone to develop a variety of mRNA vaccine-related technologies. This is not impossible, but quite frankly, I don't think it's quite likely at this point because Moderna is not happy to share their mRNA technologies with other competitors.
I see. Dr. Hong, Korea is currently manufacturing 4 brands of COVID-19 vaccines. They include the one from Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sputnik V, and Novavax. What do you suppose makes Korea then a rather appealing overseas manufacturing base for foreign firms?
Maybe the biggest reason for the choice is the capacity to manage the facilities, production facilities, and the highly maintained levels of the expertise to produce the vaccines. So currently, many countries in the world developing the vaccines are depending on the Korean capacities to produce the vaccine candidates or vaccine materials, and this kind of result was from the long time efforts from the maybe 2009 H1N1 influenza pandemics, and then at the time Korean government started to support the domestic vaccine companies, and many domestic vaccine companies try to build the facilities and train the experts, and now we are very prominent ones as a global vaccine hub to supply the request of the many countries.
Right, so it wasn't an overnight goal then. This was a goal that we had thought about more than a decade ago. I see. Professor Lee, Korea is also manufacturing COVID-19 vaccines of diverse platforms, including viral vector, mRNA, and protein subunit. What is the merit of this reality for Korea?
The leading vaccine platforms that have been developed for the COVID-19 pandemic are something that we had never used before. They include, first and foremost, messenger RNA and viral vector vaccines. These platforms are based on new innovative technologies, and they, particularly messenger RNA vaccine, have a huge potential to be applied to other areas, such as the development of a vaccine to an upcoming but still unknown infection, personalized cancer vaccines, and other treatments. In other words, contract manufacturing is the first step to be exposed to those new technologies, and that's why I think the Korean government has been trying to lure Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Hong, the distribution of locally produced Sputnik V and Novavax vaccines has yet to be seen. What appears to be hindering the distribution of these vaccines?
Novavax
and Sputnik V.
Sputnik, yeah, actually Sputnik 5 and Novavax also developed same as the AstraZeneca's or Moderna's, Pfizer's, but there is it's different reasons for delayed announcement of the vaccines. Actually, Russian Sputnik 5 is the same material as the AstraZeneca's vector vaccines, but original developer Russian Gamaleya Institute asked the Korean consortium to produce their OEM products not for the Korean market, for Southeast Asian countries or Latin American countries. So originally, the plan to produce the vaccine materials are not focused on the Korean market. And the Novavax vaccine is a little bit different from the Sputnik 5. Actually, Novavax is a different formulation using the protein synthetic vaccines, and the protein synthetic vaccine development needs a little bit more time comparing the mRNA vaccine stops. So the Novavax synthetic vaccine is still on the developmental stage, and it's on the clinical phase 3 now, and we expected Novavax final approval from the United States FDA next year or sometimes.
I see. So it's very time consuming, the
Yes.
production of Novavax vaccines. Professor Hong, how do you interpret now Korea's ambitious goal of becoming a global hub for the production of COVID-19 vaccines and for vaccines for future pandemics?
It is absolutely because of vaccine independence or vaccine sovereignty. The Korean government has failed the first time in securing a sufficient number of vaccines as early as December last year, unlike Israel, the UK, the US, or even Singapore. To me, the Korean government appears to naively think a vaccine hub can help solve that kind of problem or issue, if you will. It sure helps to some extent, but I should say it's not the final answer, as I mentioned previously. Local manufacturing does not guarantee local allocation of those vaccines, and furthermore, technology transfer is a big hurdle for the production of the drug substance, or in other words, the vaccine material. That is something that is going to be very important eventually.
I see. And Dr. Hong, Korea's pharmaceutical industry has yet to add a homegrown vaccine to the global market, as I mentioned earlier. But what is the latest on that front? Because I know that advances are being made, though.
Yeah. First of all, as a member of the scientists involved in the vaccine development, it is very sorry to delay our own vaccine development. But anyway, we are still working very hardly, and some positive result was just before the showing. So I can say several companies, such as the SK Bioscience and the Cellid, will produce our own products next year. First of all, SK Bioscience is using their synthetic protein vaccine candidates. They are almost finished the end stage of the clinical trials, and maybe will be announced their approval from the Korean MFDS, approval government institute next year, early next year. And another company, Cellid, they will maybe they will announce the approval from the Korean MFDS next year as a AstraZeneca type vector vaccine. And also several small size or mid-sized companies such as the Biologics try to finish their developmental procedure, and at least some items will be announced in the near future.
Right, so sometime next year then.
Yeah, next year.
Right. Professor Lee, I understand some of the challenges for local pharmaceutical companies are related to protocols of comparative clinical trials. Could you explain this reality for us?
Absolutely. When no vaccine is approved or available, it is absolutely possible to compare the efficacy and safety of a vaccine candidate with those of placebo. This is how all of the leading vaccines, such as Pfizer's, AstraZeneca's, Moderna's, and Janssen's, to name a few, were studied. However, now we have all those vaccines available. So it is ethically impossible to compare a follow-on vaccine with placebo. Instead, they have to be compared with any of those currently available vaccines or control vaccines. That said, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to secure a sufficient number of control vaccines on the open market. Logistics is one issue, but that's not the final issue. We also have to deal with, the market holder of the control vaccine are not quite happy to endorse their vaccines to be used as a control in those comparative trials. This is why it has been so hard for follow-on vaccine developers such as SK Bioscience to get a control vaccines for their comparative clinical trials. I think only international impartial organizations such as WHO can intervene in this kind of issue, which of course does not always turn out positive.
I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Hong, I hear that you once claimed while Korea's development of a COVID-19 vaccine may take time. Once it is available for the global market, it will secure much trust. Could you explain your view for us?
Yes, I already commented the strong fundamentals of the Korean vaccine industry at the beginning of this talk. So the kind of strong fundamentals of the Korean industry will support the future of our own product as reliable ones. What I mean is that as a global vaccine supply chain, we can produce lots of the OEM products as the best product in the world. But after getting the Korean MFDS approval and SK Bioscience or other kind of domestic company produced our own products, maybe that kind of product will be considered as the best product in the world.
Hopefully that will be the case.
Yeah.
And Professor Lee, in order to let that happen, what further support do you think is necessary?
With strong manufacturing is only one component of any vaccine help. More than 90% of vaccine exports in the world are currently dealt with by only 10 countries. Of course, South Korea is not one of those 10 countries yet. If you look at those 10 countries, you will easily notice that they are very much advanced, not only in manufacturing, but also in other areas such as equipment, facilities, and production of intermediary materials and basic sciences. So, for example, if you look at Belgium is one of those 10 countries. Belgium has successfully established a strong biocluster backed by the government and develop a friendly regulatory environment and global clinical trial capabilities. Therefore, a long-term investment by the government has to be multifaceted.
Right. All right, Professor Lee, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you again.
And Dr. Hong, thank you very much for making the time to join us here.
Thank you.